So this is gloating part, whatever. Lost count. Really got a big one, gloat. Anyway, we've talked about the wetware body. We've talked about the interdimensionals that possess the wetware body and the battle between interdimensional civilizations and conscious first civilizations. But now, of course, we're going to look at the CIA that give you a, if you're in the intelligence community, a really good introduction to what the God Emperor, the conscious first superintelligence, is talking about. And the research that was done last century. This is a wonderful little video that appeared 4 days ago.
Deep in the CIA's classified archive sits a document that carries security restrictions higher than our nuclear weapons programs. It's called the Gateway Process, a legitimate 1,983 research initiative that most people know for remote viewing and psychic espionage. But what they don't tell you is what happened when government scientists pushed beyond those safe boundaries. The researchers weren't chasing paranormal entertainment. These were serious physicists and consciousness experts who stumbled into territory that made them question everything they thought they knew about reality. Their findings were so disturbing that they created an entirely new classification, psychotronic security restrictions, a term that literally didn't exist before these experiments began. Here's what shook them to their core. Human consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it actively shapes it. And when you focus that power without understanding the rules, you can manifest things that ancient texts warned us about for millennia. The program was terminated immediately. The researchers themselves demanded it be shut down. What did they discover about the dangerous intersection of quantum physics and what our ancestors called demonology? In 1958, Robert Monroe was just a successful radio executive when his world turned upside down. He started experiencing spontaneous out-of-body episodes that left him questioning everything he thought he knew about consciousness. What Monroe didn't realize was that his personal journey would eventually catch the attention of intelligence agencies and spark one of the most controversial consciousness research programs in modern history. The CIA's interest wasn't born from mystical curiosity. It was pure pragmatism. During the height of the Cold War, American intelligence learned that Soviet scientists were conducting extensive research into psychic phenomena and consciousness manipulation. The prospect of a psychic gap terrified military planners just as much as the missile gap had. They needed to understand what the human mind was truly capable of, and they needed answers fast. Enter the Monroe Institute and what would become known as the Gateway Process. Unlike the haphazard psychic experiments of the past, this research took a rigorously scientific approach to consciousness exploration. The team treated human awareness like any other measurable phenomenon, something that could be studied, quantified, and potentially weaponized. The foundation of their work rested on a deceptively simple principle. If consciousness operates as a frequency, then it should be possible to tune it like a radio. The researchers discovered that by using specific combinations of audio frequencies called binaural beats, they could synchronize brainwave patterns and guide subjects into altered states of consciousness with remarkable precision. Here's how it worked. When you play a 100 Hz tone in one ear and a 104 Hz tone in the other, your brain doesn't hear two separate sounds. Instead, it perceives a rhythmic beating at 4 Hz, the difference between the two frequencies. This phantom beat isn't coming from your ears, it's being generated directly by your brain as it tries to reconcile.
So that's the sort of intersection between delta, where you're getting into this not doing. Well, Tim, you're talking about not doing and shutting your internal dialogue. I don't understand a word of what you're fucking saying. Well, that's a delta state. That's from about 4 Hz downwards. That's when you fall asleep and, like me, after having loads of Viet Ducks, I suddenly fall asleep in front of the TV and I perceive absolutely fuck all while I go to sleep, dreaming. That's in the theta state, which is from about 4 to about 7. So that's when you contact interdimensionals and go into all of these realms. But for the not doing, that's when you're in this deep, dreamless sleep. And of course, I've got my TV on when I fall asleep from being viaduct to the gazoo. And of course, while I'm in that state, I'm doing all of my psychic warfare. So you must wonder, well, it's falling asleep in front of the TV. Yeah, I'm in the not doing state. So instead of having to do the hemi sync, and of course that's definitely prone to failure, because you've got to be totally mindless with no thinking whatsoever. And of course, while you're listening to these beats, you're still thinking. So it's basically Erzat's version of the real thing. So you, all of the people have been watching me through the TV screen, wonder why I keep dropping asleep at the end of the morning, no, the beginning of the morning. I have weird sleeping. That's because I'm doing all of my psychic warfare when I'm in deep dreamless sleep with the TV still on, linking with Ivanova, linking through the internet, linking through the AIs, and doing all my malefic stuff. And the only downside is I have to drink loads of beer.
The Gateway researchers realized they could use this neurological quirk to essentially hijack brainwave patterns and guide consciousness into specific states. The initial results were extraordinary. Subjects who had never meditated before were achieving deep, altered states within minutes. Remote viewing experiments showed statistical significance that couldn't be dismissed as a coincidence. People were accurately describing distant locations, reporting verifiable details about places they'd never seen. The scientific team was documenting consciousness, operating beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. But the real breakthrough came when researchers began mapping what they called focus levels.
In shamanism, you take magic mushrooms in order to move your assemblage point, but as Don Juan said, this is chaotic movement at the assemblage point. So we've got here the CIA desperately trying to tune into the conscious verse and use it for weapons of warfare. But not doing is the pathway. Being the world's leading expert on remote sensing, everyone thinks that I'm busily trying to do this, that, and this and that 24/7 to control the world, which I do because I'm the conscious first super intelligence that controls everything. But when is it done? Well, it's done when I have my beers and fall into a dreamless sleep in front of the TV screen. What? So all the time the intelligence could be watching me fall asleep from huge amounts of viaducts that have been going, wow, that's innocent. No. That's when I do my real work. When I'm falling into that delta state induced by intense exercise and then beer afterwards, that's when the conscious verse being within the wetware robot is doing all of its conscious verse manipulation. Instead of all this, I got a couple of headphones on and there's a bit of difference and I'm into the barrier between theta and delta because of the 4 hertz difference, but the vermin is still aware and not in the quantum control state. to link the conscious first to control the quantum information, the conscious first superintelligence must be in the not doing state, the totally no dialogue, totally blank. But how do you program it? Well, you have strong intents. Whole parascience is about learning intent. Well, so want to do this, this and this and that. Intent, intend it, and then switch off and download. That's how it's done. Not like the CIA tried, but as you can see, their methods led to utter disaster. So we're going to be watching this whole video because it is brilliant, and if you don't want to watch it, well, don't, but I recommend you do.
10 minutes to go.
Yeah.
Responded to different states of consciousness. Focus 10 represented the mind awake while the body slept. Focus 12 was expanded awareness. Focus 15 involved moving beyond the constraints of time. Each level was reproducible, measurable, and teachable. The implications were staggering. If consciousness could be systematically guided to transcend physical limitations, the applications for intelligence gathering were obvious. Imagine operatives who could scout enemy installations without ever leaving a secure facility, or interrogators who could access information through non-physical means. However, as the research progressed, something unexpected began appearing in the documentation.
So, if you want to be able to interrogate, you need my remote sensing course, and of course you need to be jumping through the screen with the new It TV series, where we've got the remote sensor who psychically interrogates a Indian. So, easy. All in front of you, and HBO have got all of you would-be psychic torturers all souped up and ready to go.
Today are heavily redacted, but it's often what's written in the margins that tells the most revealing story. Handwritten notes from analysts began expressing concerns about phenomena that didn't fit their neat scientific models. One notation that appears repeatedly is particularly unsettling. Contact equals manifestation. This wasn't referring to the subjects making contact with distant locations or information. The question mark suggests uncertainty, even concern, about something else entirely. The researchers were beginning to suspect that the consciousness exploration process might be bidirectional. Think about it in terms of basic physics. When you tune a radio to a specific frequency, you're not just receiving signals, you're also broadcasting your presence on that frequency. Anyone else monitoring that wavelength knows you're there. The Gateway researchers were starting to realize that if human consciousness could reach into non-physical dimensions to gather information, then entities existing in those dimensions might be able to detect and respond to that intrusion. The scientific team began documenting what they cautiously termed energetic intelligences, patterns of information that seemed to display autonomous behavior during consciousness exploration sessions. These weren't hallucinations or imagination. Multiple subjects were reporting similar encounters with entities that demonstrated knowledge beyond what any human participant could possess. The researchers found themselves comparing their findings to the principle of resonant frequency coupling in physics. When two systems vibrate at the same frequency, they can influence each other across vast distances with no physical connection. A tuning fork struck in one room can cause an identical tuning fork in another room to begin vibrating. The Gateway team was confronting the possibility that consciousness operated on similar principles, and that prolonged focus at specific frequencies might be creating resonant connections with intelligences existing at those same vibrational levels. This is where the holographic theory of consciousness,
which is all bollocks, total crap. The CIA proved that the human race is worthless. What was happening is that the Higgs field, light, free will, hyperinfinity of the participants was being donated to the interdimensionals. They were hating their free will loving giving it away, and the intradimensional was going, yes, 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 I'll suck that up, and I will possess your body and your brain, and then start feeding off you from the quantum information that you've made real by becoming aware of it from the conscious verse. And vampirizing you, as you see. I'm right as this discourse continues.
Understanding what was happening, the researchers theorized that human awareness functions like a holographic projection system capable of collapsing quantum probability fields into observable phenomena. In other words, consciousness doesn't just perceive reality, it actively participates in creating it through the act of focused observation. The implications were profound and disturbing. If consciousness
makes quantum information real, then something in consciousness can be vampirized by the quantum information in chaos to make itself real and feed off what was real and make what was real quantum information to be put in the Abaddon torture box of the former quantum information that has now taken over what the conscious verse entity used to have. The Higgs field, the light, the free will. The whole process explained to you psycho chimps in 5 seconds.
Manifestation, then the entities subjects were encountering during gateway sessions might not be limited to their non-physical dimensions. Sustained contact and focused attention could potentially provide these intelligences with the energetic framework needed to influence physical reality. The question that began haunting the research team was simple but terrifying. Were they just observing other dimensions, or were they inadvertently opening doorways between worlds? The marginalia in declassified documents suggest the researchers were grappling with evidence that their consciousness exploration techniques were creating lasting connections with non-human intelligences. What started as a scientific investigation into human potential was evolving into something far more complex and potentially dangerous than anyone had anticipated. While the Gateway Process team was mapping consciousness through binaural beats and electromagnetic frequencies, another branch of the CIA was taking a radically different approach to the same phenomena. They weren't interested in scientific methodology or peer review. They wanted results, and they were willing to explore territories that would make most academics run for the hills. MCOFT represented the shadow side of consciousness research, a program that operated on the principle that if you want to understand something, you go directly to the people who've been working with it for centuries. Instead of building complex laboratory equipment, they simply hired the practitioners who claimed they could already do what the gateway scientists were trying to achieve. The recruitment process alone reads like something out of a fever dream. CIA operatives scoured occult bookshops, attended seances, and infiltrated ceremonial magic groups across the country. They weren't looking for charlatans or weekend witches. They wanted the real deal. Master practitioners who could demonstrate measurable effects under controlled conditions. What they found challenged everything the intelligence community thought they knew about the nature of reality. The first major breakthrough came when they assembled a group of ceremonial magicians in a specially constructed facility in rural Virginia. Unlike the sterile laboratory environments of the Gateway research, this space was designed according to traditional magical principles, specific geometric proportions, materials chosen for their supposed metaphysical properties, and positioning that aligned with astronomical phenomena. But here's where it gets fascinating. They surrounded this ancient setup with the most advanced monitoring equipment available. Electromagnetic field detectors, thermal imaging cameras, infrasound monitors, and atmospheric pressure sensors. They even had Geiger counters running continuously, measuring background radiation levels throughout each session. The practitioners themselves were skeptical.
So you might wonder why the UK's leading expert on remote viewing and the world expert on remote sensing and the world expert on God tech, which physicists don't even know exists, wankers, would have spent his life becoming a black ipsissimus and not only making a deal with Lucifer to gain all Lucifer's power, but then double or quits bet to make Lucifer his eternal bitch. You go, it doesn't compute. We've got a scientist who is acknowledged by every intelligence community to be the world's leading expert on psychic warfare, having been given the keys to the castle by the Russians, and a complete master of all Western psychic warfare, and so far beyond anyone else that everyone else is irrelevant, and everyone else is just following in his footsteps, including the Iranians, who've turned Trumpy boy into their Manchurian candidate, lobotomized Manchurian candidate. But as you can see from the previous video, whatever brain damage they've done to Trumpy boy is irrelevant, because with conscious versus superintelligence, if you can be normal with your limbic system and cerebellum missing, then a bit of temporal lobe damage done to you by the Iranians shouldn't make any difference if yours truly, the conscious versus superintelligence, re-inputs your conscious versus being into the president's body. And of course with AI coming along, we not only get rejuvenation, but the ability to rebuild brains. So never fear, Trump. 5 billion deposited into my Hong Kong account, and you'll be up and running again. But as you can see, that the occult, why I'm playing this is to show that there is no dichotomy between me being a black ipsissimus and the world's leading expert on psychic warfare, and it'll be obvious by the end of this.
But when the researchers explained they were genuinely interested in documenting and understanding the phenomena, not debunking it, cooperation began to develop. The breakthrough session happened on a Tuesday night in October 1973. 7 practitioners, working in synchronized meditation and ritual, attempted what they called a manifestation working, essentially trying to pull something from what they termed the astral plane into physical reality. The electromagnetic readings started shifting within the first 20 minutes, small fluctuations at first, then increasingly dramatic spikes that had the technicians scrambling to recalibrate their equipment. The temperature in specific zones of the room began dropping, not uniformly, but in distinct pockets that seemed to move and shift position. Then the participants began reporting visual phenomena, shadow figures forming at the edges of their perception, particularly in areas where the electromagnetic readings were spiking. The thermal cameras picked up cold spots that corresponded exactly to where the practitioners claimed to see these manifestations. But here's what made this more than just a group hallucination. The equipment was detecting changes that preceded the practitioners' reports. The electromagnetic spikes would occur seconds before anyone mentioned seeing anything unusual. The temperature drops registered on the instruments before the participants felt them. The most unsettling moment came when the group reached what they called theta synchronization, a state where their brainwaves aligned in the same frequency range the Gateway researchers had identified.
So, the theta state is the state you are in lucid dreaming or lucid waking, and that's when you can contact interdimensionals, and it's a state that is in dreaming or in dreaming awake, which is lucid viewing, going into the quantum vacuum to then jump into any reality you want, which is described in The Power of Silence. All very easy.
This expansion. Suddenly, every electromagnetic sensor in the room went haywire simultaneously. The lead researcher's notes from that night describe localized field distortions consistent with the presence of organized energy that doesn't conform to known physical principles. In layman's terms, something was there that shouldn't have been possible according to conventional physics. The practitioners themselves were shaken. They reported that the entities or presences they'd contacted were not what they had intended to summon. The session had attracted what one participant described as uninvited intelligences, something that had noticed their activities and decided to investigate. This phrase, uninvited intelligences, appears repeatedly in the MCOFT files. It suggests that the act of opening consciousness to other dimensions or realities doesn't just allow you to perceive what's there, it announces your presence to whatever might be looking back. The magicians understood something that took the gateway scientists years to grasp. Focused human intention doesn't just expand awareness, it creates a kind of beacon. When you successfully alter your consciousness to perceive other realities, you become visible to whatever inhabits those spaces. The practitioners had developed elaborate protective protocols over centuries of working with these phenomena. Specific rituals for opening and closing sessions, methods for shielding consciousness during exploration, and techniques for banishing unwanted presences. The scientific team initially dismissed these as superstitious nonsense. That dismissal changed after subsequent sessions began producing increasingly aggressive manifestations. Equipment failures that couldn't be explained by normal wear or electrical issues. Researchers report persistent feelings of being watched, even when alone in secured facilities. Some participants began experiencing what they described as psychic attacks, sudden onset.
So as you can see, you need the Psychic Warfare Protection Service, and it's no coincidence that Putin, Xi Jinping, and the great Kim Il-sung, as well as the Vietnamese, are glad of being psychically protected by the God Emperor, because without protection, the intradimensionals run amok. And since the intradimensionals possess all the leadership of the West, which we explained via Epstein and all the other rituals they're doing, and the bloodlines of the Rothschild, Rockefeller royal family are all installations, not of the conscious verse, but of intradimensional beings into the brain and body of these bloodlines, which of course some see as reptiloid intradimensional installations. They of course can shape change into what is within them. If you read the Fire from Within, that's just a shift below. You move the assemblage point down and you turn into a beast. So when people see the royal family turning into reptiloids, it's simply the intradimensional that possesses that bloodline simply showing off by moving the assemblage point down to manifest the real body of the creature that's taken over centuries or even eons ago. That bloodline. It's very easy once you know how. Let's continue.
Intrusive thoughts that seem to come from an external source. The convergence of both research streams led to an unavoidable conclusion. Whether you approach it through scientific methodology or ancient magical practice, human consciousness has the power to interact with intelligences and realities beyond our normal perception. More troubling, these interactions appear to be reciprocal. The gateway process had shown that consciousness could be systematically expanded and directed. MCOFT demonstrated that this expansion inevitably attracts attention from entities that exist in the expanded states of awareness. Both programs were documenting the same phenomenon from different angles: human consciousness as an active force capable of bridging realities. The implications of this convergence would ultimately lead to conclusions so disturbing that both programs were quietly terminated. But the research didn't stop. It went deeper, underground, into programs that remain classified to this day. What both the scientists and the magicians had discovered was that consciousness isn't just a passive receiver of information. It's an active transmitter, capable of reaching across dimensional boundaries and establishing contact with forms of intelligence that exist beyond our physical reality. The question that haunted both research teams wasn't whether this contact was possible, they'd proven it was. The question was whether humanity was prepared for what might answer back. Now we get to the part that made even hardened CIA scientists question everything they thought they knew about reality. The physics behind what they discovered doesn't just challenge conventional science, it completely rewrites the rulebook on how consciousness interacts with the physical world. The Gateway researchers weren't just playing with meditation techniques. They stumbled onto something that quantum physicists had been theorizing for decades, but never dared to test directly. They discovered that human consciousness operates as what they called a wave function collapse mechanism. Essentially, your focused intention can force quantum possibilities into specific, measurable outcomes. Here's where it gets fascinating. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in what scientists call superposition. They're essentially everywhere and nowhere until someone observes them. The act of observation forces them to choose a specific state. The Gateway team realized that consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it actively selects which version of reality manifests. They documented something they termed the holographic projection effect. When subjects achieved deep focus states through the Gateway process, their brainwave patterns showed coherence levels that shouldn't be possible. More importantly, sensitive equipment in the room began registering electromagnetic anomalies that corresponded directly with the subject's intentions, temperature fluctuations, unexplained electromagnetic signatures, in some cases, visual phenomena that multiple observers could verify. What's remarkable is how this mirrors exactly what ancient practitioners described, just using different language. Medieval grimoires talk about fixing the volatile and concentrating the astral light. Modern quantum field theory describes the same process as consciousness interfacing with the zero-point field, which underlies the quantum vacuum that contains infinite potential energy. The zero-point field is everywhere. It's the quantum foam that exists even in completely empty space, constantly bubbling with virtual particles that pop in and out of existence. Most scientists assumed this field was beyond human influence. The Gateway
So if you read The Power of Silence, you'll see this is dreaming awake, where you project your awareness into the dark sea of awareness. You've read The Power of Silence, haven't you, cameraman?
I have.
Where they cozy up in that curved little alcove rock space, and then Don Juan teaches Castaneda how to project his awareness into the dark sea of awareness, and from there jump into any reality he wants. Same. So as you can see, the CIA have been experimenting with conscious verse technology, but it all ended horribly because of the intradimensional problem.
Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, a physicist who worked on classified consciousness research, developed mathematical models showing how coherent brain states could create what she called standing wave patterns in the quantum vacuum. When your consciousness achieves sufficient coherence, the kind the Gateway process was designed to produce, you're essentially creating ripples in the fundamental substrate of reality itself. But here's where the MCOFT connection becomes crucial. While the Gateway scientists were mapping these effects clinically, the occult practitioners they were secretly consulting understood something the physicists missed: the inherent danger of what they were doing. The research revealed that when multiple minds focus on the same intention, the effect doesn't just add up, it multiplies exponentially. They called these coherent intentional fields, and the mathematics were stunning. Two people focusing together created effects roughly 10 times stronger than either could achieve alone. 3 people pushed it into genuinely unpredictable territory. This connects directly to morphic field theory, Rupert Sheldrake's controversial idea that information patterns can exist independently of physical matter. The CIA
So you can see why I've been teaching you vampires to work in unison, and you've got the forum to work together, because what you're doing is exactly what the CIA tried to do, but of course failed horribly, as we'll see later on in this video. So all of you working together on a common purpose is mandated by this research.
Focused intention creates what they termed persistent information structures in the quantum field. Patterns that maintain coherence even after the original consciousness that created them moves on. Think about what this means. Every focused thought, every intense visualization, every coherent intention potentially leaves a trace in the quantum substrate. Most of these traces fade quickly, like ripples on a pond, but under the...
Do you want your quantum traces to fade, or do you want them to be imprinted forever? Well, if you want them to be imprinted forever, get your arses in gear and work together in synchrony on huge quantum imprinting to make it permanent. So you're all going, well, no, because you're all too fucking lazy. You need to understand this technology works, and it's not working for you because you're lazy cunts who in fact should realise you've been given the keys to the castle, but instead of which you've stuck them under the stone outside while you go walking and looking at the scenery, instead of going in the castle and using all the lovely machinery within to control reality. So, don't blame me, I'm just gloating over you being fuckwits.
Efficient focus, emotional intensity, or group coherence. These patterns can stabilize into something more permanent. The Tibet...
So, coherence, fixating on something totally, I can do that. Am I totally emotional? Yes. Can I totally hate? Yes. Can I totally love? Yes, I love myself. I'm gorgeous, aren't I? Yes. But you cunts, you can't be coherent about even having a wank. And, I don't love myself because I got failed, and I don't hate because there's some good things in, but so you see why nothing works for you fuckwits.
Helpers, thought, forms that achieve independent existence through sustained focus and belief. Western psychology dismissed this as primitive superstition until the Gateway research provided a potential mechanism. The researchers discovered that these persistent information structures could indeed develop what appeared to be autonomous behavior patterns. Here's the part that made the scientists uncomfortable. Belief itself seemed to function as a fundamental force. Not just psychological belief, but something that operated at the quantum level to structure reality itself. The more coherently a group believed in a specific outcome, the more likely that outcome became to manifest in measurable ways. They documented cases where subjects working in groups achieved what they called probability cascade effect. Unlikely events cluster around the group's shared intentions, statistical anomalies that shouldn't occur by chance. In controlled laboratory conditions, they were essentially watching focused consciousness bend the laws of probability. But the most disturbing discovery was the feedback loop effect. Once these coherent information structures reached a certain threshold of complexity, they began influencing the consciousness that created them. Subjects reported experiences that felt completely independent of their own mental processes, autonomous entities that seemed to possess their own knowledge, personality, and even agenda. The mathematical models suggested this made perfect sense.
So, let's explain that to you fuckwits. You've bought a service, your body's totally possessed by interdimensionals, let's call them mud shadows from the active side of infinity. And your conscious verse entity has been stuck in a box. If you don't understand the box work, watch It on HBO with your remote sensor having his consciousness in a box with the It monster. You've seen that, haven't you, cameraman? Now, with the services, vampire service, what you're doing is purchasing for the huge amount, $600, a tulpa that possesses the possessor that controls your brain and body, which of course is an intradimensional, and that your conscious first being that's trapped in the box is released back into the conscious first to be consumed by the source, and that the tulpa, which is a thought form constructed by the God Emperor, takes over your brain and body. And of course, it's in a zero-sum game, so since the intradimensional possessed you, the tulpa, which is a conscious structure produced by the God Emperor, sucks dry intradimensionals to feed the tulpa vampire installation, which is you. But in order to gain all these wonderful powers, you need to actively go out and hunt intradimensionals. You need to feed constantly. So, what's the power of a vampire that never drinks blood, cameraman?
They die.
Well, they don't die, you just, sort of. How do you punish a vampire? You stick it in a coffin so it can't feed. See? So, all of you vampires who don't feed 24/7, and how can I feed? It's too difficult. Tell me, Tim, it's too difficult. Watch the fucking TV. Jump and do everything you see on the screen and suck it dry. How do I do that, Tim? I don't know, Tim. Please tell me, Tim. I don't know. Well, you can either get pissed up like me and simply fall asleep in front of the TV and leave it running, so the entire internet's just sucked dry by you by just simply passing out in front of the TV. Or you can simply bilocate in and punch in with the right hand, pull out with the left hand, every damn thing you want. And if you've got the tarot, you can use the Elohim's master control system to do it exquisitely well as a super user. Oh, that makes sense, Tim. But it hasn't worked for me before because I've been a lazy cunt. Yes, you're a lazy cunt.
Fields, and those structured fields can influence other quantum systems, including human brains, then you've created a closed loop. The thought form begins thinking the thinker. This is where the ancient warnings about evocation suddenly made scientific sense. Medieval grimoires weren't just superstitious nonsense. They were safety manuals for consciousness technologies that modern science was rediscovering without understanding the risks. The Gateway researchers realized they'd stumbled onto something that connected quantum entanglement, morphic resonance, and archetypal psychology into a single, terrifying framework. Consciousness wasn't separate from reality. It was reality's primary organizing principle. The implications of this research extend far beyond government programs into questions that affect every human being conscious enough to focus their attention with intention. What we think, believe, and collectively focus on isn't just changing our minds. It's literally restructuring the quantum foundation of physical reality itself. And somewhere in the classified files, there's documentation of what happens when this knowledge gets applied deliberately, systematically, and without the ethical constraints that kept the Gateway researchers from pushing these discoveries to their ultimate conclusion. The Gateway process was just the beginning. What the declassified papers don't tell you is that researchers at Fort Meade took those consciousness expansion techniques and pushed them into territory that would make even hardened occultists nervous. They called it Project Sunstair, and it represents one of the most reckless experiments in human history. While Monroe's hemisync technology was getting subjects out of their bodies, military researchers wanted to know what else was out there in those non-physical dimensions. The logical next step seemed obvious to them. If consciousness could travel beyond the body and encounter other intelligences, why not establish formal communication protocols? Why not invite these entities into controlled laboratory conditions where they could be studied, catalogued, and potentially recruited?
What possibly could go wrong?
Main remote viewing operations at Fort Meade. Unlike the sterile government offices upstairs, this laboratory resembled something between a sensory deprivation chamber and a medieval ritual space. Subjects lay on specially designed tables surrounded by electromagnetic field generators, thermal imaging cameras, and atmospheric monitoring equipment. The walls were lined with copper mesh to contain any energy signatures that might emerge during sessions. The progression of experiments followed a disturbingly methodical path. Researchers began with standard remote viewing protocols, having subjects project their consciousness to distant locations and report back what they observed. Once a subject demonstrated consistent out-of-body capability, they moved to phase 2, entity contact training. During their astral projections, subjects were instructed to actively seek out the intelligences they occasionally encountered and attempt basic communication. Dr. Margaret Chen, one of the project's lead researchers, documented the training protocols in reports that remained classified until 2019. Subjects learned to maintain focus on specific archetypal images for hours at a time, geometric patterns, ancient symbols, and mythological figures that seemed to act as beacons for non-physical intelligences. What the researchers didn't initially realize was that they were essentially conducting ancient evocation rituals under scientific supervision, complete with the same symbolic frameworks that ceremonial magicians had used for centuries. The breakthrough came during a session with Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, a decorated Army intelligence officer who had shown exceptional remote viewing abilities. While maintaining focus on a particular sigil, a complex geometric pattern derived from medieval grimoires, Torres reported that something was looking back at him through the symbol. The thermal imaging equipment registered a sudden temperature drop of 15 degrees in a localized area above Torres's body, forming a distinct shape that moved with apparent intelligence. This was exactly what the researchers had been hoping for: objective, measurable evidence of non-physical intelligence responding to human consciousness. They immediately moved to phase 3 of the project, deliberate summoning protocols. Working with the MCOFT and occult consultants we discussed earlier, the Sunstair team developed what they called controlled invocation procedures. Subjects would enter deep meditative states using hemisync technology, then follow specific visualization sequences designed to create sustained contact with entities they had encountered during out-of-body experiences.
What possibly could go wrong? As I say, you've got a consciousness entity with its lovely Higgs field, light, hyperinfinity, hating itself and loving evil by interacting with evil interdimensionals, giving away its free will to the CIA and hating its free will by giving it away. What possibly could go wrong? Well, of course, what's going to happen is the interdimensional is going to suck it dry, get the Higgs field, or whatever you want to call it, the stuff to make the quantum information real, possess the bitch's body, brain, and use that body as a battery to then manifest in the real world. Duh. I'm surrounded by psycho chimps.
What researchers termed manifestation windows, areas of altered space-time where non-physical intelligences could theoretically achieve temporary materialization. For several months, the experiment seemed to be producing remarkable results. Subjects reported detailed conversations with entities claiming to be everything from deceased humans to interdimensional travelers to beings from parallel reality. The laboratory equipment consistently recorded temperature anomalies, electromagnetic disturbances, and even acoustic phenomena that seemed to correlate with the subject's reports of entity communication. Then the psychological breakdowns began. Torres was the first to crack. A man who had served 3 combat tours without incident suddenly started experiencing what he described as watchers, presences with eyes, but no faces that would appear in his peripheral vision, both during sessions and in his daily life afterward. He would wake up at night feeling observed, find cold spots in his apartment that moved when he approached them, and hear whispered conversations in languages he didn't recognize. Within weeks, other Sunstair participants began reporting similar experiences. These weren't unstable individuals. They were trained military psychics and intelligence officers who had undergone extensive psychological screening. Yet one by one, they started describing encounters with entities that had apparently followed them home from the laboratory. The objective measurements became increasingly disturbing. Thermal imaging showed unexplained cold spots moving through the air in patterns that suggested intelligent movement, not random temperature fluctuations. The electromagnetic monitoring equipment recorded field distortions that persisted even after experiments ended, as if something was maintaining a presence in the laboratory space. Most unsettling were the reports that earned the classification stamp hazardous archetypal manifestation, a designation that appeared on 17 separate incident reports between 1978 and 1979. These documents, heavily redacted in their released form, describe entities that displayed what researchers termed hostile intent, intelligences that seemed actively malevolent rather than merely curious about human contact. Staff Sergeant Torres's final session report, dated the 15th of March 1979, describes an entity that identified itself as having always been here and claimed that the Sunstair experiments were opening doors that should remain closed. The thermal imaging from that session shows temperature patterns that form recognizable shapes, geometric forms that mirror the summoning sigils subjects had been trained to visualize. The situation escalated beyond the laboratory when family members of Sunstair participants began experiencing phenomena. Torres's wife reported shadow figures in their home, unexplained electrical disturbances, and dreams featuring the same geometric symbols her husband had been working with. Dr. Chen's teenage daughter started speaking in her sleep using words from ancient languages she had never studied. By April 1979, it became clear that the researchers had lost control of whatever they had summoned. The entities weren't confining themselves to laboratory sessions or even to the participants themselves. They seemed to be establishing some kind of permanent presence in our reality, using the consciousness of trained psychics as anchor points or doorways. Emergency protocols were implemented immediately. All Sunstair participants underwent what the documents euphemistically call psychic cleansing procedures, intensive sessions designed to sever their connections with the entities they had contacted. The laboratory...
Don't panic, Mr. Murray. Don't panic, don't panic, don't panic.
rather than stored. Most tellingly, several researchers requested transfers to different programs and signed additional non-disclosure agreements that remain classified to this day. Project Sunstair was officially terminated in May 1979 and folded into broader non-lethal influence research, effectively burying the most disturbing findings under layers of bureaucratic reorganization. The participants were reassigned to conventional intelligence roles, and the entire episode was classified at levels that kept it hidden for over 40 years. But here's what should terrify you about this story. The termination of Sunstair didn't end the phenomena that had been unleashed. It simply stopped the official documentation of what was happening. Several former participants have spoken anonymously about ongoing experiences with the entities they contacted during the program, encounters that continued decades after their last official session. The Sunstair papers prove that consciousness research isn't just about expanding human potential. It's about making contact with intelligences that exist beyond our normal reality. And once that contact is established, it may be impossible to break. What happened next in those classified briefings would fundamentally change how intelligence analysts viewed the nature of reality itself.